Hello and welcome to a brand new video tutorial in Lightwave. Some weeks ago I posted this render in different social media platforms and I received a lot of positive feedbacks, so thank you for that. And one question was how I get this level of realism out of Lightwave. Well, the answer is pretty simple. Use high quality textures, understanding the principle of lighting, and camera work. In this tutorial, I want to show you some tips and tricks how I did it. So let's get started. Alright, so here we are in Lightwave Modeler, and as you can see, I imported the model as an FBX into Lightwave. This model came from polygon.com. Check this site out. Is a great resource for 3D artists. And the model is already imported now and it's ready to jump right into layout. So let's do that. Click on here, send object to layout. All right, so here we are in Lightwave layout now. And as you can see, the model is imported correctly from Modeler. So the first thing I do is I go to View tab and switch the layout until I have a perspective view, a top view, and the right view. This view down here, I can change what I need. If I need a left view, right view, front view, back view, and on the top view, I can easily handle all the elements in the scene. And on the perspective view, I can turn on the VPR later on. All right, so let's get started. So here is already a camera applied to the scene, but I don't use that camera. I want to create my own camera. So for this, I just zoom into the scene and position the view roughly where it should be at the end. Okay, so something like that. And then I come up here on this little arrow here, click, and go match viewport perspective and create a new camera. Call it shot cam. Oops. Okay. And then I switch from perspective to camera view shot cam. So now we're looking exactly towards that camera. When the camera is selected, I go to properties, click on this button or press the P button on your keyboard. And then I change the focal length to an 85mm. Okay. So let's position the camera so that the object is back into the scene. Something like that. Okay, cool. And back into the camera properties, I change also the resolution, 1280. So 1280 by 1280. I will, for the final render, I will increase that to a 4K square image. And now I have to reposition the camera a little bit. Okay, so something like that. Perfect. Okay, so now let's start to fire up the VPR the first time. And we can see that the model and the scene already looks pretty good. It's a kind of a clay render now. Okay, so the first thing I want to change is the lighting setup. Okay, so for that I select this light, which is already existing in the scene. And then I click on properties or P on the keyboard, and then I change the light type from distance to area light. And as you can see that the scene has changed drastically. The shadows are more soft and the light is more smooth. Okay. So now the next thing is when I move this light, the direction of the light rays are always going straight into the scene. Right? But what I want is that the light is always pointing to my object. Okay, so for that I need a control item. And for that I go to item, null, create a new null, call this target. Select the light again, and this time press the M key on your keyboard, and this open up the motion options for lights or cameras or whatever. And here you can choose target item. Choose the target and close the window down. So now wherever I move the light, it's always pointing to my object. And this is exactly what I want, okay? So let's position the light somewhere behind. So I get this nice rim light, okay? And then I go to the scene editor, open up the new scene editor, and then I select the light and go to add clone one time, press OK. It's creating a second light with the same properties, and then move this light over here on that side, okay, to just fill up a bit the gap between the dark and the bright areas. All right, so now the next step is to change the color of the background or of the floor to see a bit better what's going on. So I go to surface editor, and here is the floor, right? And I change the color to a light gray, something like that. Okay, looks good. All right, on that position, we are ready to create the materials. Okay, so for that, we go into the image editor, and the image editor window, it's going to open. You can press on load, or you just can select all the textures that you need and click and drag it into this field here. So I will do that. Okay, so all textures are applied to the image editor. And the next step, this is a very important step to do to create or to use the full PBR material standard, okay? Select all the colors materials or all the textures that has color in it and change it in the color space from RGB to sRGB, and then select all the other textures including the normal maps, which are grayscale values, and change the color space from RGB to linear. This is a very, very important step to have exactly the values that you need for the PBR workflow. All right, so now we are ready to create the materials out of textures. So come up here, surface editor, and choose your fruit layer, and make sure that the material is set to principled BSDF, okay? And then edit node graph, like that. So the first thing we need is an image, so type in image, and it's popping up 2D textures image, click and create a new node. Double click on the node, and then it's open up another window, and here we can load in the texture, okay? So in the image, when you load in all the textures you need into the image editor, you will be able to select it here, okay? So now let's choose the color. And then, because this model is UV unwrapped already, just use the UV map and it's that UV map. Okay, let's close that down and plug that in, and you will see that the texture is applied correctly. So we need another image node, and on this one we load in the glossiness with the same settings of the UV map. This time we use the Luma and plug it into the roughness. Okay, and so now you start to see how the materials come together. Okay, so we create another one. You can create every time a new one here, or you just can copy paste these existing nodes. I will select it from here because when I copy and paste, it's creating a strange sound, and I don't want that sound into the tutorial. So double click on that, and this guy is reflection. There we go. Same thing, UV map. There we go. And then also here use the Luma and bring it into the specular. Perfect. And then we need the last one, which is the subsurf scattering material. And here again, UV map, the corresponding UV map. And then we bring here the color into this subsurf scattering color slot. The next is the normal map. And double click and select the normal map, and then UV and the corresponding UV map. Sometimes, not all the times, but sometimes you have to invert the Y, and sometimes not. It depends on what kind of normal map you have. Some normal maps you have to invert the Y, and some you don't. Maybe some of you know when I have to do that and when not. So I try with not inverting, and I plug that in and see how it looks. And this normal map, this way, it looks good to me. Yeah, okay. So that's it. That's basically it, right? Now the fine-tuning is you can fine-tune the effect on how the maps works by just going in here and click on edit, and then you can tweak the brightness, contrast, hue, saturation, and gamma to just to fine tune on how the map works. Okay, so the brighter this map is, the more rough it become. The darker it is, the more shiny it become. Okay, so in the value of 0, it's basically exactly as it should be, but I tend to change a little bit the settings to create a kind of a little bit more reflection into the fruits. Okay, and then basically here on the color, I make it just a touch brighter. So with this technique, actually you can fine tune your materials. Okay, and it's pretty cool. In other renderers, you probably would use the color correct node or color shift node or something like that. But in Lightwave, I found out that the edit image and then editing here that does the job. Okay, so perfect, that looks good to me. Okay, so let's do the same thing for the bowl. To have a faster workflow now is you can just do the following. Okay, so right click and copy the material that we used for the fruit and paste it for the bowl. So this looks strange at the beginning, but the good thing is that when we go into the bowl node editor, all the materials are already set it up. Okay, so we don't have to set it up again, right? We just can double click and change the materials or the textures, sorry. And then here, of course, we have to change the corresponding UV map. Perfect. Let's go this guy. Use the gloss, change the UV map. Perfect. Here, use the reflection map, change the UV map. And then subsurface scattering, we don't have it. And the normal map, let's use normal. Change the UV. And it's done. Okay, so here I want to have that the wood has a little bit more reflection. So I go into the roughness map. And what I like to do is just bring it down the value just a little bit to have this little spotlight here. Okay, so that looks good. Make sure that both objects are turned on the smooth here and here. Okay, so that works. All right, so this looks already pretty good to me. And so now here we have an environment light. Okay, this is a very important light. So select this environment light, go to properties, and as you can see, that is already using the standard blue sky material for that. But we don't want that. So if I turn this off, as you can see now, I have only the light contribution into the scene. Okay, so now what we need to do is use an HDRI map, okay, to create an overall lighting, right, of the scene. And these two lights here and here just supports the focus, okay, and bringing up the reflections or the rim lights and stuff like that. But the overall light situations, I would use an HDRI image. So don't be scary to use HDRI images combining together with other lights. Okay, so it's totally okay to lit up a scene like that. So what do we have to do? Right click, add texture environment. Click on texture here and then change that to spherical. And now we have to load in an image. Okay, so what we do is go to click here and basically that's it. And as you can see now how the scene has changed in lighting. Okay, and now the next steps are just fine-tuning. Okay, so I can just increase that to 200%. Okay, and then I select that light and maybe bring this up to about, let's try 10. Okay, and move it a little bit. I want to this shadow, dark shadow space there to be a bit more bright. I like that rim light there, but maybe we can make it a little bit stronger. Okay. And so now what I see is that the HDRI, the bright side of the HDRI comes from the wrong angle. So we have to rotate the HDRI. So come up back to the environment light and then go into the texture and rotation, rotate it at 90 degrees. So now it's coming from the right side, like that. Perfect. So now I see that the fruits are a little bit too shiny. So as you can see now, I start to fine tuning the things to adjusting things and fine tune things, right? Yeah, that looks much better. All right, so the next step will be the floor. And to texturing the floor, it's the same process as I did for the bowl and the fruits, right? If you want to speed up your workflow, just copy the bowl material and paste it for the floor. So come up here, add a node, and then just change the textures. So let's choose this guy. We use the stone texture, and then we use the roughness, and we can use the same for the specular. We will change this later on. And then subsurface scattering we don't have, and then the normal map here. So what we have to do is, of course, we have to change the UV map. Okay. For a flat surface like this, you can just choose the cubic mapping. It works great. Okay. So change that to cubic and cubic and cubic. All right, perfect. Okay, so we have textured everything. And now last but not least, to give this nice shot look, we need depth of field, of course, right? Camera, properties, go to the depth of field tab, turn on depth of field. And as you can see now, it's blurred out everything, because here, if you go closer, you can see this dotted line, this circle. Okay, so this is the focus distance. So we have to increase that until the circle is on our focus point, right there. And what I also want to do is I want that the camera pointing to my object. So press the M key on the keyboard and choose exactly the same target that we chose for the lights. And then we can just play around with the camera and the target. So we have to zoom in a little bit here and push this up. Okay, so that looks pretty good. Select the floor and just increase the size a bit. Maybe we have to move it up slightly. And I would say that's it. Okay, so this already looks pretty good. So the last tip and last trick is, if you render this out now with all these settings right there, you will have a lot of noise. So how I can reduce the noise in depth of field in Lightwave. The only thing you have to do is in the camera, in the properties, you have here the minimum samples and the maximum samples. Okay, so I increase that to, you can increase it as much as you like, but make sure that you always keep the point of 2 or the values of 2. Okay, so 8 and then 16, 32, 64, blah blah blah, and so on. Okay, so I would go for 32 samples that will shoot out of the camera, and then you can see that the noise, it's going down. Okay, if you want to have more samples in the lights, you can do that for the lights as well. Okay, so here, if you click on that light, as you can see, the light just shooting out 4 samples. Okay, so I would recommend to increase that to 16 for both lights. And the HDRI, the same thing. So as you can see, 4 samples. Let's crank this up to 16. Okay, so now we should have enough samples to render out this scene. Okay, so in the render settings, the only thing I changed is I rendered out the entire scene with brute force and brute force on both render engines, and I increased the value because I have subsurface scattering here. I increased the value for subsurface scattering to about 3 bounces, and then reflection about 3 bounces as well, and the rest is all default. Okay, all right, so that looks pretty good to me already. Okay, one note is, if the noise is still too strong, you can change in the render properties. You can set it, the noise filter, to GPU denoiser. Okay, and as you can see now, the denoiser jumps in right into the BPR, and it's creating a very soft depth of field without noise. Okay, and it will refine. So now it looks a little bit splotchy, but when you leave it at rendering, you will see that it will define the details. Okay, so as you can see now, it's splotchy, but when you leave it at rendering, you can see that it's refining and it brings back the details. Okay, so you can use the GPU denoiser as well. Just a quick note. So that's it. That's basically the end of the tutorial. So if you like it, please leave a comment and press the thumb up. And until the next time, I hope you learned something and you liked the tutorials. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening, and see you next time. Bye, everybody.